Hi, everybody. I'm Dre.
I'm John.
And this is Voices in the Dark, where we're, fucking it up again, where we're learning how to human.
Yes.
And what could be more human than bumping uglies?
Yes, this is this is the first of a new series that we wanted to put together. We've been thinking about for quite some time about sex and relationships. A lot of what has drawn us to make our podcast and the topics we've chosen has been to talk about interpersonal relationships and social dynamics, psychology, understanding ourselves, issues of self-confidence, self-perception, and all of those are definitely very much tied up with the topics surrounding sex and relationships. And so the first one that we wanted to start with is about dating apps.
Yes. I mean, even 5 years ago, to say that you met your significant other on a dating app or dating website was seen as something to make fun of you about.
Yo, you met on the internet, losers.
Whereas these days, it's like 99% of all meetings seem to be happening that way.
Certainly feels that way from people around me. Like it's really the exception. If it's like, oh yeah, we just like friend of friend, or we met in a bar. You're like, oh really? How strange.
How quaint.
So that's the topic for today. But coming up, we've got quite a long list of things that we want to get into, and we'll hopefully get some guests on the show to talk on some of the subjects as well.
It'll be interesting to get experts. For example, Esther Perel will be great to talk to, but also normal people that have interesting experiences.
Yeah.
We have a few friends that have done some interesting things as far as sexual behavior is concerned. And we could definitely, well, if we can convince them to publicly appear on camera in front of our lovely YouTube audience, then perhaps it might be very interesting.
Yeah, we'll black bag them instead if they...
Can we do the whole, I didn't know what I was getting into. Like, you know, that kind of like, and then accidentally someone turns on the light.
And they're like, oh no. So some of the topics upcoming, I'm going to tell you some of them, but we'd love to know what you would like us to talk about too. So it's not just stuff that comes to our mind, but what do you think are the important things or things you want to know more about, or maybe you've got strong opinions about. Get in touch. Facebook at VITD, on Instagram at VITD.pod, or you can hit us up via the website, though that's not so easy, I don't feel. Hit us up on the socials.
You can land on the website, click a little chat icon, and chat to us relatively real time.
Well, you'll talk to Dre because I ignore those. So I find those the very annoying, and they ping me on my phone. So it's all down to you.
One more notification.
Yes, and if you're one of our Patreon supporters, definitely get in touch because, as always, we really value your input. Thank you for investing in the podcast. And if you have something we really want us to get into, then as one of our intellectual stakeholders, we'll definitely be interested in your input. That's patreon.com/VITD. You can support the show that way. Financially, if you don't have the money to do so, no worries. Thanks for listening. If you can recommend us to a friend or go to iTunes and leave us a 5-star rating and review, that helps a shitload, especially if you want to get the likes of Esther Perel on the podcast.
I think I have her email, like a personal one.
Hey Esther, come on our show, talk about infidelity. Her books are great. We should definitely talk about those issues she gets into, like the idea of what infidelity means, why and how and what. Because go and check out her little Audible series if you want, where she does couples counseling mostly around issues of infidelity, and she's got this amazing little series where you hear actual couples discussing issues between them, and Esther's input and reflections on them. I thought it was incredible. I listened to all of them in like 2 days. Anyway, other things we would like to talk about, things like gender roles, casual sex, open relationships, breakups, the need to take time for yourself, getting kinky, sex parties, power dynamics, oral sex, anal sex. Everything is on the table, or the floor, or up against the wall.
On the kitchen counter.
Everywhere.
Oh yeah, and if you have anything you want us to talk about or try out, perhaps. Oh. Because we are thinking of going to sex parties and furry conventions as kind of, not fly on the wall. We might participate. Who knows? It might be our kink. We might discover what we really want in life. But the idea is to be kind of explorers of of human behavior.
Well, yeah, I mean, because it's easy to have an opinion about things you don't know about from afar, but going and speaking to the people who are into these things is going to be a really enlightening experience. I certainly find that if it turns out a friend or someone new I meet does something that's totally outside my usual experience, I'm like, oh, okay, tell me more. Let's open my mind to this. And maybe it's not my thing. That's fine, but it's definitely interesting to know what it's actually about for the people whose thing it is. So dating apps, I don't know if they're my thing, but they're certainly things that I use. Why do we want to talk about dating apps? You had a good explanation. So
we were talking about what is our why for this episode. And I was being kind of almost facetious about it because I'm not... if Simon Sinek is watching, fuck you. Well, no, not really. But, I don't really buy the whole why thing. I think you're a little enamored of yourself over having discovered this. And I think it's one of the least important things in the macrocosm. Like, the reason why things happen is so unimportant as opposed to why, as to how and what is causing them to happen. Mm-hmm. The emotional human decision of why I'm talking about. It's more of a marketing ploy. But it is useful to think about in terms of your interests. It is a personal question as opposed to something else. Mm-hmm. In this case, I was trying to think, why do I want to talk about sex and about dating apps in particular? And I was thinking, what I'm interested in is digging beneath the surface. I don't think people ask themselves anything more than boring, obvious questions about things. Mm-hmm. Someone might raise their hand and say, "Oh, is this good for our kids?" or something like. Mm-hmm. But it's kind of vague. It's not particularly based on anything else. Whereas right away, I'm thinking this is the largest social experiment ever designed. We've connected everybody, and we are studying their sexual and dating behavior on a macro scale never before possible. King Kinsey would wet his pants if he could have access to the like Tinder data. And immediately my question is it affecting what we do? Or is it a reflection of who we are?
Yeah.
What does it tell us about ourselves, how we behave in these apps? Or are they modifying how we behave? And so what does that tell us about ourselves? And that is just just scratching the initial surface. And there's probably more complex questions that could arise out of this.
Yeah, I don't think that I'm not going to say we have the answers, but we've certainly got some thoughts on it to open up the discussion. And I think it's a discussion that's worth having because it is such a widespread element, a new and changing element in the way that we relate to each other. And it is affecting the most core human interactions, especially ones so caught up with our self-esteem, which is going to be a big part of what we have to talk about. I think they really do reveal some core psychological issues, good and bad, drives that people have around intimacy in particular. And I think if there's a principal complaint about dating apps, I think that it's reducing real interpersonal connections in some way, that it's like some cheap way that you hide behind your phone rather than putting yourself out there in like a vulnerable, immediate way. And I don't really agree with that. I think that maybe there's certainly an element of that in that it's certainly easier to ghost someone and just disappear and so on. But, with phones anyway, or whether it's mobile phones or if it was just, refusing to answer the phone when you think that the guy that you don't want to talk to anymore is calling, I don't think that's new. I think it's also... I think it's not that it's reducing certain things so much as maybe emphasizing some instead of others. So there's an element of why, just put it a different way, why is it that we think that meeting someone in a bar or through a friend of a friend is more natural than meeting someone through another format? Especially when...
At what point in history was that a norm? Only in the last 30 years maybe, right?
Yeah.
I mean, even 50 years ago, a woman being like a woman allowing herself to be picked up at a bar was a whore.
Yeah, that's
it was
also
not
new.
Normal behavior. So to normalize it because of that, that's what we did. So clearly it's fine.
I mean, I've certainly noticed that people, I even see it in myself, that because I met my boyfriend Jamie just kind of in everyday life up in Edinburgh, I'm like, oh, well, that's sort of novel, unusual, and nice. And, well, certainly it is nice. I'm definitely into it. But telling people there's almost a kind of like, oh, well done you. It wasn't through an app.
Yeah, as if it's an achievement.
I'm like, well, it was just a bit of luck. And in fact, when I first saw him in person, I didn't speak to him. I turned on Grindr and discovered he was there and sent a message. But that's kind of a longer story as to how it all kind of came about. But I don't see that these things, that there's any particular merit into bumping into someone. It's nice when you have that kind of, oh, and then I met someone by chance, and it's a cool little enjoyment of the fact that there was a bit of happenstance involved. But the idea that people are more callous and mean behind the screen of their dating app, that I suppose might be true, but I think it's also potentially a good thing that if people are prepared to be their worst selves on these things, then you find out more quickly.
I don't know if about worst selves. I think people are prepared to be themselves.
Oh, okay. Same.
Yeah, I think it just reveals who you truly are, where your insecurities lie, like whether you have a complete mental breakdown if someone doesn't reply within 10 minutes, descending into madness, and you can see the various stages of denial and then forgiveness, and I mean, you see the mental breakdown, in particular in the Grindr messages you showed me. There was some...
Yeah, I've got a selection of screenshots of some of the most dramatic moments. So
a true descent into madness.
And this is, okay, so if it's not their worst self, then, I mean, I think in some ways it might be their worst self, that it's like the greatest insecurities just being given free rein, because it's less embarrassing immediately to just write a stream of abusive, sad messages than it is to scream at someone in a cafe.
But I would argue that your core self, in the absence of social judgment and pressure, is your core self. And by going on a dating app and then showing your friends your communications, you could bypass 10 years worth of psychiatric work. They'd be like, oh, look, you got daddy issues. Oh, and abandonment issues.
Well, okay, but I guess when you say true self, I guess what I'm pushing back against is the idea that can't be changed. Like, true sounds like that's you forever to me.
Oh, right. Well,
and I'm thinking, well, no, not necessarily. That's just maybe where you're at.
No, I wasn't meaning goodbye and good luck.
Yeah.
I was just meaning that's what informs and instructs their day-to-day decisions, even when they have the other shield of appearing better because they're in direct contact. What's deeper inside is that insecurity that is making them decide whether or not to call you back, making them decide whether or not to apply for a promotion. The thing that is directing them is that thing that revealed itself in the dating app. They can change it, they can work on it, but ultimately the deepest layer is the fucked up one.
I think that to move them from the deeper level slightly higher to the way that people communicate, I think is definitely quite rapidly revealed. I mean, I'm sure there's some people who just don't feel comfortable communicating in text form, so maybe that is a downside for them. But what I'm thinking of is when I've received, maybe I've sent one message back, or maybe I've sent no messages back, and it's just, I turn it on and there's 20 messages from someone going, oh, hey, how you doing? You look great. ? How are you? ? Oh, you're ignoring me. Oh, you think you're so much better than me, do you? You think you're so much better looking. Well, why don't you have some self-respect? Why don't you respect others? I'm a really good person. I have had these bunch of occasions, and you're like, oh. So if say it was someone who I'd actually had something of a conversation with, and then they flip out because they're like, I see that you're online, but you haven't replied to my message. Well, that definitely tells me that that's not someone I would feel comfortable with in any sort of even dating or other scenario, because someone who can't respect the fact that you might be doing other things with your time and assumes that because you're doing X, actually it's motivated by not wanting to be talking to them, it's a total recipe for disaster. And I think that the apps reveal that very immediately. Although I don't think that it's something that we can't all fall prey to, where we're waiting for a text message to come, and you kind of start unraveling a little bit because you don't know that they lost their phone that day or something happened at work or whatever. Like, why are they ignoring me? So it's a tendency that I think we can all be faced with, but it's also kind of a test that I've certainly been kind of proud of myself when I haven't written the text like, why aren't you answering me? And just kind of left it to see what happens.
Yeah, definitely interesting. Yeah, so like abandonment or lack of response, definitely one of the big triggers on there. There also seems to be a disparity in expectations or some weird... Basically, everybody on a dating app seems to be convinced that they are the hero of a romantic movie that deserves to get exactly what they want.
I don't think it's like
regardless of what that is, regardless of whether it's good for the other person. Like there's this sort of expectation that they're going to find what society has told them is the right mate for them that they have agreed upon, like a Prince Charming or perfect woman.
I disagree, but not saying that that's wrong, but I think that's definitely not the only part. I think that people largely seem to come on with a strong sense of what they think the app is for and what they should get out of it. And one part is what you just described of, I will find the perfect man or the perfect woman and nothing else is gonna do. But other people come on, maybe this is more evident on something like Grindr rather than the straight or whatever mixture apps that are out there, is that there are extremely kind of aggressive kind of personal statements saying like, I'm only looking for the one. Okay, like no hookup, stop. Why is everyone a whore? Then others going, I'm not here for something serious. This is Grindr, for fuck's sake. They're just as like, don't be playing the big romance game. This is clearly just a hookup app for certain things. People who have to perform this idea of, oh, I'm not a slut, but actually I just really want lots of casual sex, but I'm not prepared to say that because I think that doing that makes me a slut, which is a bad word, and then I'm a bad person. But there's a sort of aggressive assertion of, this is what I want out of the app, and because other people want something different, I'm going to mock them. Because basically that's just a product of the fact you've spoken to people, you didn't get what you wanted, and so you're going to say that they haven't understood what the app is for. Right.
Well, the annoying thing is that because these apps want to maximize the amount of time you spend on them, the amount of matches you get, and so on, they don't have exclusion filters most often. I don't know if Grindr does. But you can't say, I don't want to see anyone that wants, a casual relationship. Whereas in the old dating websites, the whole point was that you'd get matched with people that wanted what you wanted.
Yeah, there's a bunch of filters available on Grindr, but they're almost all for the premium version, which is pretty expensive, which I certainly am not paying for. But maybe it's worth breaking down some of the differences here, because Grindr was maybe the most prominent one first.
It was the first one, really.
I don't know if it definitely was, but I guess.
I'm pretty sure. Like, I remember, like, it was being told when I was sort of researching apps and things like that, because they were new. Mm-hmm. So in particular, when the iPhone allowed third-party apps, not immediately. At the beginning, the ecosystem and the underlying structure wasn't ready, so they didn't even let anyone know that they were going to allow third-party apps. A lot of people assumed that Apple was never going to allow apps that they didn't design on the phone.
Okay, the walled garden.
Right, but I'm pretty sure the plan was from the very beginning to have third-party apps eventually, when everything else was sort of locked down and ready and done properly. But regardless of what the rationale was, at some point they were like, okay, third-party apps are allowed, here's how you do it. And I think not only was Grindr the first dating app on there, but I think it was one of the first apps.
Wow.
Immediately. And I'm pretty sure we could probably look up the history of it, but like the first thing that happened was, ooh, we can find each other.
We can fuck.
We can find each other and fuck.
Well, I mean, the so-called gay community definitely was right in there, because a lot of the issue in a world where you're not the majority is simply finding the people who might even be willing. It's not even about like finding someone hot. It's like they need to be willing to bang you at least potentially. And you need to try and let's try and, that's why, for many people, a gay bar isn't just about community or hanging out with friends in a comfortable environment. It's also, well, at least there's some chance that people here also have a similar sexual orientation. I first heard about Grindr when Stephen Fry mentioned it on Top Gear, which is funny because it's a point that a lot of people, guys that I speak to, have also remember that somehow. They're like, what's he talking about? I got to get this thing. Like when it was still very new. And I've even spoken to the founder of Grindr.
Oh, wow.
Because when it was first created on Grindr, he'd got his own little sort of profile so he could appear to anyone or look wherever. And for whatever reason, he spoke to me, and I was in Russia at the time, and he was like, "Oh, could you translate the system into Russian?" And I was just learning Russian at the time, so it's like, I don't think so. But that's my little Grindr claim to fame.
That could have been your moment. That was your career path.
It could have motivated me much more to learn Russian much quicker. So the difference is, Grindr just gives you a grid of profiles based on their proximity to you. There's no matching. You can talk to anyone that you see, and there's only, I don't know, a couple of dozen guys that you can see. Unless you get the premium version, then you can see even more. So it's all very location based, who's nearby. So there's this sense of immediacy to it. And you can guess why, because it's about hooking up, though.
I think they should have had a display mode. From the very moment I learned that it was you could see how far away they were.
Yes.
I immediately thought of the motion detector in Aliens. Mm-hmm. Doop, doop, and you see the little dots.
The little dots
circling in, getting closer.
That would be real gaydar.
I reckon it should have a mode like that.
But there's a downside to it that in places like Russia with much more rampant homophobia, they've disabled and scrambled the location stuff a bit, because anti-gay skinheads and so on would have Grindr and triangulate with multiple phones to work out where a given person was and then attack them.
Wow.
So I'd rather they didn't have a gaydar.
Do you think a good percentage of those skinheads came up with that and had to go through with gay bashing when really they had Grindr on the phone for Grindr reasons? But when someone says, "Hey, why do you have that there?"
I'm a skinhead.
It's a triangulate.
They have to do some explaining. And it's evolved over time to say what is it you're looking for? And there's the euphemistic right now, which is basically I'm horny and I would like to get my rocks off, down to relationship. And I find it quite curious that I was thinking about this the other day, that if in a self-description I am looking for a long-term relationship, I'm not sure that's not really to do with apps. This is to do with the psychology of I'm looking for a long-term relationship, that's all I'm looking for, which is missing crucial steps I'm just looking to maybe connect with someone that I really enjoy spending time with, and maybe something cool will develop between us, instead of the focus on I want to be owning a house with someone and have a dog and security.
Also, I mean, it's like someone going, you know what, I'm going to have a career in IT, and then suddenly be going, I'm only looking to be the CEO, mate.
Yeah, basically.
You have to go through the steps. It's going to take a while. You're going to have to go. The way you get to the one is by figuring out the one, and that's by spending time with them. Blah blah blah. And it starts with a date, and then if that date doesn't go well, there isn't a second date. And I guess there are people out there that are intentionally looking for not that, and you might want to avoid those. But maybe you don't. Maybe the people that are avoiding a long-term relationship include you're the one that if only they met you, you'd convince them, because they feel wow, I wasn't looking for that person to be with. In fact, kind of that's kind of what happened to me, really. I wasn't looking for a long-term relationship, but now I am in one.
I think that's often a solid foundation. I certainly wasn't looking, nor was Jamie, and we're like, oh, but this is awesome, because there wasn't an agenda to have a certain outcome. It was just, I'm really enjoying spending time with you. Let's keep doing that. So slightly, I mean, obviously, as usual, we just speak in spirals around these things. But I guess the last point I'd make about the Grindr sort of interface thing is that because it's based on proximity and you just speak to anyone that you can see and receive a message from anyone who can see you, a lot of it is just lots of messages of just people sending their dick pics and whatever else. And it's not about that, the positive thing that I see in Tinder and related apps where, at least in principle, you speak to someone because you've both said, oh, you look all right. I'm kind of interested.
It's a little more consensual.
A little more consensual. So perhaps you can explain some of the other apps, because you did some research a few months ago.
Yeah, at one
quite
point,
a lot of months ago, actually.
At one point, I had every single dating app there was installed on my phone, including Grindr, because I was just looking through everything. I thought, why not? Like, let's put that one. Let's put the threesome one. Let's put, like, I had every single, like, dating or sex app that I could find. A lot of them are bad copies that require money to do anything that would actually get you to meet anyone. Mm-hmm. Like the threesome one. There's no way you'll meet up with a person unless you paid per persons, I guess.
Because
it's gated. Like replying to their message saying, "Hey, how about it?" requires you to have paid. Like you can only send a like or something like that.
This amazes me. Okay.
So I mean, who would like? You need to be pretty into threesomes with couples as a single person to pay like 10 quid a month to have this on your phone.
You're just like the cattle, but you have to pay.
Yeah, so that one didn't work. But I did Tinder. Tinder and Bumble are the main ones, I think, for straight people, at least in this country. They seem to be the most useful ones anyway. Mm-hmm. And both of them operate on a system of swiping left or right. So you get a series of pictures of people that you might be interested in that they decide based on an algorithm, based on distance, and a few other criteria that you can sort of tweak. And then a bunch of other things that you don't know or have access to. And we'll get to that in a minute. But you say, let's say let's say I'm swiping and there's, let's say you pop up.
Hello.
Because it's for both straight people or gay people, so you can
and bi people. You
can
say I want to see both.
You can get both.
Yeah.
So if you popped up, I could decide to swipe right, which means I like you and I approve and I would like to speak to you. And if you can swipe left to say no, not interested.
But I don't know that you've said yes to me.
You have no way of knowing this. But if you also swipe right, we both swipe right, and it's a match. And suddenly we get both told it's a match, and we can start a conversation. I don't know who would be watching this that doesn't know how Tinder works, but you never know.
Perhaps.
But the weird thing is the dynamic. So there's differences in how the sexes behave and what they put into their bio.
Okay.
Women, by a very large percentage, write the whole not looking for anything casual. Mm-hmm. And whereas guys are doing the opposite half the time. The behavior is also different. So guys often, at least the ones that are most successful on Tinder and get the most out of it, have realized that they should just swipe right on everybody. Mm-hmm. Because then that means that whoever swipes right on them, they then have a choice between those people.
Yeah, so they've decided, okay, so now I can see who would be interested.
Yeah, so then it doesn't become a who do you like. It becomes a who do you like out of the people that have liked you. Mm-hmm. Which increases your odds of having casual sex massively. Well,
and Tinder also tried to limit that unless you pay premium, you have a limited number of likes per day, I think.
Yeah, that's correct. There's also other variations like a super like.
And there's a difference with like Bumble, which at least like female friends of mine who've used it seem to like Bumble. I think it's sexist. So tell me about it.
Yeah, but there is a good reason. So it's like it should be sexist because unfortunately...
Because men are pigs.
Yeah, essentially. Well, it's not just that. It's that the impression that men are pigs given by a few men that are unsocialized the same way like a puppy that hasn't been brought around people is, behave in such a way that makes women constantly wary of anyone that wants to contact them. Mm-hmm. By putting the onus on the woman for the first contact, so the man cannot contact a woman even if he's matched. He has to wait for her to say hello.
Okay.
That predisposes two things. Like the woman must have liked the man enough. It's a conscious decision on her part to engage. Mm-hmm. And that means that the party that is hardest to get a little bit warmed up towards a conversation, the woman, statistically speaking, has already gone through that.
Okay.
Whereas if you don't have that, like on Tinder, out of the matches, for a man, only 10-20% of them speak to you.
Although I don't know if that's purely just a Tinder thing or a sex thing, gender thing, because I've found I've used Tinder for a bunch of years, and it's not really very. It's more like a game of like swipey, look through a gallery of people. I got a match. That's points to me in a game that doesn't end. The majority of people then, I don't talk to them, they don't talk to me, or one does and the other ignores. And I was thinking about the psychology of this. I mentioned it to you the other day, that I think it's because many of the matches that I then get, I'm like, why did I swipe right? And it's because of the psychological mechanism that we decide based on the things that we've most recently seen. So it's not that if I just saw that person out of, just like the blue and would have gone, oh, they're really hot. It's because I've just been swiping no through lots of people I didn't find attractive at all. And by comparison, this person looks good. And once you're not in that immediate comparison moment, you see the profile and you're like, what? I'm not into you. Why did I do that?
But there is a sex disparity in that, at least out of the women that I know that are on Tinder, my friends, they tend to get chatted up by every single match that they have. Okay. Whereas the guys are like, no one talks on Tinder. Oh. Maybe it is depending on how hot you are. Maybe I only know hot women. I don't know.
That you curate the women that are your friends.
Yeah, maybe the reason they're not talking to me is that maybe they do the same thing that you're describing. They swiped on me and then they're like, oh God.
No, what was I thinking?
It is harder for a man to convey value on Tinder than it is for a woman. A woman, traditionally speaking, is conveying her sexual attractiveness. And Tinder is perfect for that.
Is it? Because I guess it is, but I'm now going to question some of that. Like the fact that women you say predominantly, I'm not looking for casual hookups. That's actually saying I have value in the current system in which there's still the predominant idea that sex is something that is the thing you want from a woman, and she only has power while she withholds it from you. So it's like, I'm gaining points by putting this, even if that's not true. Even if the woman writing that is like, frankly, I would really love a good lay, but I don't want to attract the kind of guy who's just got a vision of women as sluts. So I'm going to say I'm not that. So, okay, I understand how that works from a kind of social dynamic way within our culture, but I also think it's a strangely artificial pretense. And then we come to like profile pictures, and this is not about just women. This is about how all of us try and look at my value. And when I've out of interest switched Tinder into, let me see women, I'm like, what the hell is this? Why am I looking at all these ducks? Why is it endless duck face and mirror selfies and beauty filters? And I'm like, this, it's really absurd to me how the majority of women that I have seen on Tinder represent themselves, but then I'm aware that to me, I'm like, oh, this is so different because it's women. Whereas when I'm looking at the men, I'm like, oh, a lot of men do really silly things. So it's easy for me, but inaccurate to make the step and think it's about women rather than just...
Maybe also the women that the algorithm is choosing to show you.
Oh, I'd have duck faces.
Yeah. Because I get a lot of the other kind that I find just as obnoxious. The trying not to be those women as hard as they can. So showing me pictures of their yoga pose and them backpacking through Nepal and talking about how they value all living things. Like it's, I don't know, maybe I don't know why I get those ones. And it's also trends. Mm-hmm. So right now, very, very hot to pretend that you do yoga. So that's
I need a yoga pose on mine, and I do yoga.
But I have a feeling that most people affect it. I don't think you can see the ones that are regulars, practitioners, usually you can tell, as opposed to people that are trying to use that as a marker of value.
Mm-hmm. So what we're seeing here that is different from in-person things to a degree is social signaling. Because you can have a little vignette of these pictures suggest the kind of person I am. So if you're meeting in person, maybe it's the clothes that you choose that indicate some things about yourself, the way you scrub yourself up or you don't. And maybe it's some of the things that you say, you make reference to stuff you do. Now with the picture, we're doing the painting a thousand words thing. We go, okay, look, I'm outdoorsy and I'm athletic and I like animals.
Yeah. Which confuses me when they make really clearly bad mistakes.
Such as
women will have way more often than guys, from what I can tell, because I was when I was doing my research, I ended up turning on men as well. So
you're always turning men on, baby.
But I was trying to see the differences and things like that. But it happens to both, actually. But women were doing this more, having clearly a picture of their ex in their photos.
Oh.
Sometimes the first photo. Oh. Like, it's a picture of them with, it's definitely not a friend.
I'm kind of speechless.
Yeah.
Why would you
do that? So that's interesting. What I have hair on my nose. So either it's like, do they really want to date someone? Is it to make sure that when that guy like sees it, is it really her? Like yeah, because I'm in the picture too. Like what is it that they're trying to achieve? I'm not sure.
Is it the equivalent of what we know from the game of like social proof, where you're like, look, I'm desired by a man?
That doesn't work that way.
No?
It works the other way.
Explain.
Technically speaking. So if you see a dude surrounded by hot women, at least in person, you're like, oh yeah, those girls feel comfortable around him.
Uh-huh.
But the other way around doesn't necessarily work. And also doesn't work with a removal. No? If it's just a picture, it's kind of hard to do. It's douchey to have a dude show like that he's surrounded by women on his... People are like, that guy's a player, as opposed to, oh look, he's out with his friends and having a good time.
I don't know if... I think I agree on that last bit. I don't know if I agree on it not being a kind of social proof.
It's different. I don't think it works if you still have the picture and you're using it. Learning about, oh yeah, he had 2 long-term relationships in his life, like, is something that women look out for at a certain age.
Because is that a good thing?
If a man's like 40 and he's never had a long-term relationship, it's risky to invest as a woman. Either he doesn't know how to have one, or he is not looking for one. It is, by that point, it's a clear marker of beware. Do you want, if he really loves you and wants you, it might even still be a project anyway, because he won't know how to share a household when you move in together. He'll be selfish because he's never experienced.
Because he's not toilet trained.
Like, essentially.
The more that we speak, the more I think that we may have to have a second episode on this with some female presence, which I guess is going to be a running theme throughout, because we're just two friends who make a podcast, and whilst I can give you the gay agenda or whatever that is, I do feel a sense of unease over saying women want this or do this. Although, on the other hand, just having a woman, a friend of ours or someone contributing, that's only then going to be their personal view as well. Yeah,
and ultimately we can only speak based on experience and on what we can see in others. I'm not saying all women, and I'm not saying women genetically. I'm saying right now the experience and research shows that on a greater proportion, statistically speaking, of a population of women, there are certain behaviors. You can't say no to that. You could say no as in, like, oh, that's intrinsic behavior that you couldn't remove if you've changed society. You could say, well, let's see, maybe it is, maybe it's learned. Or you could say, well, it's a generalization. And it is a generalization. I'm painting with a broad statistical approach on average. But in terms of observing and seeing things, there is a truth to some of the stereotypes. The whole point of a stereotype is that it's a shortcut that you shouldn't use on an individual.
Yeah.
But that when speaking of a population, it tends to be semi-accurate.
Or to have been founded on certain
principles and in observations, which could be perhaps confounded by something else. So you might come up with a conclusion, and actually the real reason why something is being observed is something else.
Yeah, so there could be a stereotype of behavior, but you're misunderstanding why that behavior exists. So that's sort of our little proviso.
Disclaimer, so we don't get So we've got torn down by the anti-feminists. Maybe we'll get torn down by the feminists.
I mean, maybe, but again, like for our regular listeners will know, we want to explore ideas, and that means being wrong a lot of the time.
Yeah, and thinking things out loud, and occasionally thinking things out loud. Go, what did I just say? Oh
no, I don't. So there's So we're talking about self-representation essentially in these pictures and descriptions, and you can agonize over your profile thing, like what do you want to say? Do you want to say like, frankly, I'm lonely and I just want human connection? Well, that's not a sexy thing to do, so you try and present yourself a different way. But something that's kind of is so common that it's a running joke among people who use Grindr is that there'll be a self-description which is like, I'm sane and sorted, expect the same. And whatever it is they say, and sane and sorted is always this kind of thing like, oh, I don't need drama. And you look at the picture and you're like, I can feel the drama in your soul. But looking for the same, it's a running joke, just going, oh yeah, same, want the same. Like, you're looking for the same person as you? Is that... And it seems like a lot of guys using this app, that's what they seem to want. And a lot of it seems to be fueled by an anger towards people who are not like them. So for all that people use the words gay community, it's very, very fragmentary in many different ways. And there's an awful lot of animosity on Grindr in both directions. Like, I don't like feminine guys. I expect you to be masculine. All of these crude things that I think usually most non-gay or bi people are not aware of, because they would think that these things would usually be about like male and female stereotypes, but then it's like those stereotypes then exist within just men. I don't know really about lesbian dating apps or equivalent things, but then there's this whole like be masculine, be feminine, be more like this, be more like that, or I'm going to judge you. The intensity of the way that it's expressed is often extremely disturbing, where it's so much rage, anger, and bile. You just read a bio, and I'm like, this is a shame, because you've got a really pretty face, but you're full of hate. And like we were saying earlier, the benefit of that is that you discover it very quickly, and you don't need to have wasted going on a date with somebody to discover that they're racist, for example. And there's lots of racism. Lots and lots of racism on Grindr. It'll say like, I'm only into, or more likely it says, no blacks, no Asians.
Wow.
And it just like that clearly, I'm not exaggerating. And it's shocking.
I guess, but also if they're not attracted to that.
Yeah, but so I can understand the point going, but you could articulate it in a way that doesn't sound so horrible. I mean, you could say like, I particularly say the things that you do. Like, I'm really into Asian guys, I suppose you could say, though other people would still like wave fingers at you potentially. But at least you'd be taking a positive angle rather than saying, I don't like this, this, and this, because then it's just your laundry list of hate.
This is where filters would be helpful. It'd be much easier to be secretly racist if you could just not be shown to the ones you're not attracted. That's interesting. Not sure.
It's
hard to pull out what is caused by the app or the environment created by how the app is structured, the user experience and the user interface, versus what is just human behavior brought to the surface. Like, I can't quite figure it out.
Well, I think it's certainly true you can have human behavior or human preferences brought to the surface. So, but it gets caught up in problems, say, around quote unquote race. So an example that comes to mind is, whilst even with my suggestion of make a positive statement saying I'm really into Asian guys, could be seen by some people as like a sort of fetishization. And like a friend of mine was accused by his partner of doing that when the partner discovered that my friend's ex was also Asian. It's like, oh, so you're just into Asians. That's your thing. Like you fetishize us because we're from the East or we're exotic or whatever. He was like, that's not true at all. People have...
Just squinty eyes and your obedience.
That's what he said. Now, people do have preferences towards certain types of looks, bodies, eye shape. All these are just sort of an aesthetic thing which we may have preferences for. It's not controversial, I don't believe, to say I prefer brunettes to blondes.
Well, taking the opposite argument to the extreme level, there are people out there that are trying to shame mostly men into dating like trans or gay people because they're discriminating by not doing that. Like,
oh, really?
It's like, how dare you be like, press me by not being open to have sex with me? Like, there are, I mean, it's not a large number. There's some people that are making that argument, and then which then causes the other side to then whip up into a Jordan Peterson-like frenzy, like, and fight back and say, this is where we're headed. You're going to be told by society that you have to fuck, which is not happening. But there are a few weird people that think that. So it's interesting that it's not like a complete hoax. There are some people making that argument.
It's, and does that include like body shape? Because
like how dare you not have sex with me because I'm fat?
Because it's kind of, if you are not someone who's putting this like Orientalist filter over your eyes and going, I really like Asians because they're so exotic or whatever, and it's simply a sort of, you look at people from that part of the world and you more than say you do from Western Europe find those people attractive. Okay, it's not very different from going, yeah, well, generally I prefer slim and skinny guys. And I've had so much flack and challenge over the years over that, like, why? And people thinking, oh, it's because you like to feel powerful or dominant or something. I'm like, which is the same argument as you like exotic Asians. I'm like, well, no, I really find them beautiful. I mean, not all, but as a sort of general look and aesthetic, that is the same as the more like culturally accepted one as men, women, whoever, looking at guys who work out and going, oh, I really like how he looks. Look at his muscles. Like, well, but it's also the same thing.
What would be wrong if the reason was that you're more attracted to the feeling of power rather than the way they look?
If it's a sort of consensual dynamic, sure.
Yeah, like, why is that bad? Why is that not okay? Essentially, anyone that complains about sexual preferences of any kind is saying, it really bothers me that I'm not included.
I guess often.
Pretty much.
I guess what the dating apps are doing is accentuating this element through needing to like describe tick box things like I want this, or I don't want that or that, where you're just filling in a form. Whereas I guess usually outside of apps, these preferences emerge less obviously.
It also shows a couple of things. One, because it's a digital system, you don't have to meet people in place. I mean, in real life, necessarily. People are being completely honest about it. Like you were saying, no blacks, no Asians. Like, no one woke up to a bar and be like, hey, I'm looking for someone for tonight, but no blacks.
No blacks and
like really loudly. No one would do that, but it's on it's the equivalent of doing that on your profile. Millions of people could swipe through or take a look. If you like, literally the whole world could know that you're perhaps a little bit like, prejudiced in some ways. Like, there's a willingness to open up in a way that is curious in a way. And it's also laziness. Just let them communicate with you and then block them or swipe left. Like, why do you need to prevent them from even approaching you? What is it? What is that? Is it insecurity? Like, even them just doing that bothers you so much? Or are you just unwilling to sift through like 20% more profiles?
Yeah, that is interesting. It's like you've so closed your mind, like you've made a decision that I'm only into X. And then, well, you're not going to know unless you've had a lot of experience that's led you to realize this. But it's also, even then, kind of dumb, because what if you meet someone who is fantastic but turns out to have a skin color different to the one that you thought was the only one that you liked? I mean, that's pretty wonderful and exciting. And think about what you would miss if you decided that just because you only like people with green eyes, that this person who's absolutely amazing to you but they've got brown eyes, oh no, we can't do this. That's not how it's going to work. You're robbing yourself of the possibility of growth and experience,
or also robbing your possibility for yourself from the from the ability of not letting people know that you're racist. Why? Why not? Why? Even if you weren't going to talk to them, isn't like why? Why do you need to like preemptively strike?
Well, it's an act of aggression, I think. It's the kind of where we've talked about honesty as a weapon, as a blunt instrument, where there's such this false premium placed on, I'm just honest, that's just how I am, you have to accept it, which more often than not means I'm going to dump all of my shit and prejudices and views in front of you and you've got to deal with it now. Like, well, no, I don't. Take your shit back, take it off my doorstep, I'm not interested. This is like the whole world isn't about you, isn't about having to accept you. Oh, I've just got to tell you. No blacks, no Asians. This is gonna be the title of the episode. No blacks, no Asians.
Oh dear.
Yeah, so
I think we get a lot of hate for that.
Yeah, and rightfully so.
And no one would watch it to know that that's not what we think.
Yes.
And they would be like, "How dare you? Blah blah blah. People like you." And like, did you anyway?
So I also want to talk about the strange psychology of catfishing, which maybe is something which has come about more than I imagine it could have before apps.
I think the biggest catfishing app is Facebook.
Okay, well, let's define catfishing, because I only learned it actually in a really fun way, because I was meeting a guy after chatting on an app, and along he came, and he was like, "Oh, yeah, okay, great. I was so sure you were catfishing me, but it is you." And I was like, "What are you talking about? What is catfishing?" Catfishing is where you use someone else's pictures and pretend to be them. And in your mind, you pick someone who's more attractive than you are, I guess due to some self-esteem issues, or we'll talk about other reasons why, I guess. So once I had understood what the hell he was talking about, I was like, oh, well, that's a nice compliment, I suppose. You thought that my face was worth stealing to get laid.
Nice.
Yeah, it was nice, especially because he was a model. I was like, yay!
But yeah, it's an interesting behavior, which is the two primary reasons I've seen it performed. And there's a whole TV series and movie about it. And then spun out into other things. But the most common reasons for someone catfishing you is either to experience control in their life, which they don't have, or because they're really, really, really lonely and insecure.
Yeah.
And they don't want to be themselves. Themselves is not attractive. Perhaps themselves, it often happens with the wrong sex as well.
The wrong sex?
Wrong as in, you know, a girl pretending to be a dude because she's a lesbian and she wants this woman. Oh,
so it becomes an outlet to try and take a little step closer to this thing you want and can't have. Or
potentially not out of like, oh, I can't have it because I'm not ready to be a lesbian, but also like they know they'd be rejected as a woman because this person's straight, or because they then feel themselves unattractive. I've never seen someone who catfishes that I thought, wow, that person's stunning. They didn't need to catfish. Like there is some rationale behind pretending to be somebody else for them, for a lot of the ones I've seen on the TV program that my flatmates like to watch.
I think there's such again, it's back to what these apps really bring up are elements of self-esteem, that it can become so much more obvious and pronounced. That I think, so if you get to the stage of the catfishing, and it's because you have such low self-esteem that you don't imagine that anybody would want to go on a date with you or sleep with you, you're confining yourself into a box where it's not possible that it can happen anyway. You're protecting yourself in a sense by going, well, I can never end up being rejected because it's never possible that I can actually go and try and find out. And then in a less extreme example, or you haven't got to the catfishing stage, you present yourself in profiles, in the words you use or the expressions you pull, as though, oh, I'm just being kind of, how to describe it? It's not I'm trying to be funny, but it's like, oh, I'm a bit weird and I'm pulling my mouth in a funny way because I'm not taking this seriously. But you can see it's all from a position of tension. And I have definitely posted profile pictures like that. And like,
look how relaxed I am.
Well, like in the past where I was kind of less like confident in myself, or I've spent most of my life thinking I'm not attractive at all to anybody. So it's been a long road of being able to just feel good about myself and realize that when I do that, I am more attractive to people. So pulling those faces as sort of, oh, I'm looking quizzically in the mirror and I'm not taking it seriously, and is now when I see it, it's so obvious to me because I've been there, like, you got some self-confidence and insecurity issues, which is now meaning I'm not very likely to talk to you because I'm expecting this is going to be a bit of a handful.
It makes me think of something that happens to girls all the time, guys don't experience generally, that undermines their confidence and is really annoying and patronizing, but that maybe is useful. Well, at least it'll be useful for guys that don't get it. We told them, why aren't you smiling? Smile more, sweetie. Oh. Girls get that a lot. So that because they are treated more harshly if they're grumpy. Yeah. Or more like, oh, why can't she even put on a little smile kind of thing? Which is a very sexist thing to do. But I don't think that guys necessarily don't get treated badly for being like grumpy or unattractive from a point of view that like unattractive to be around, essentially. They just don't get told that. It's subconscious rather than conscious. It's not like a sweetie, why don't you smile more? It's like, what is wrong with this guy? I don't want to hang around him. So maybe just getting the feedbacks like, hey, you're frowning again. You know, well, people are going to start running away.
If it's done from a positive place.
Well, if it's done from a negative place, even so, it's terrible, it's humiliating, it's patronizing, whatever. But also maybe it will help you if you listen to it. Like, not in a nice way, in a way that's likely to cause psychological damage.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. It is going to cause some psychological damage. You're like, oh, everyone thinks that I'm a freak. And
do you want to be sane or do you want to be successful? You know,
I'm going with sane. To exhibit some more of my critical prejudices about dating apps, if I see pictures where it's like a guy kind of cuddling with his dog, I'm like, absolutely not. Right out. Basically, you're telling me you're lonely. You love your dog in place of a boyfriend or significant other. The dog's in the bed with you. I am going nowhere near you in your bed. But this could just be my dog prejudice, because if they've got a cat, I'm like, oh, that guy's great.
But if you find out they have a dog afterwards, that's not a problem. The fact that they chose to signal with a dog.
That's the thing. Right? It's the signaling. Like, what are you choosing to show?
Yeah. So that's an important distinction. It's not so much about some of the things that are being shown. It's that the fact that they've been chosen to be shown. So like the fact that like the whole ex-boyfriend picture.
Okay.
It's not that they had an ex-boyfriend.
Well, let's psychoanalyze what pictures I choose to show, and I don't remember now what the ones I've got. So I'm going to open Tinder.
Okay. That's exciting.
Live on air. And I'll tell you one thing, that there's so many aspects we can talk about dating apps that I feel we jumped all over the place, but I hope that the things we've talked about have been interesting. But another angle that I've been reminded of now is that it has definitely hit my sense of self-worth as a person. The fact that Tinder tells you, if you let it, which is the picture which gets you the most likes. And it is always ones where it's kind of more a focus on my body than my face. So if it's just like a face picture, and the same on Grindr, like attention, absolutely different. If my biceps are visible, I'm suddenly much more popular. I guess that's something I've got to accept, not as a huge significant statement, but it can easily...
You're making assumptions. Mm-hmm. The ones where your face is present, do you look straight into the camera?
I don't remember. I haven't had just a face pic for ages because of this.
So if I remember correctly, guys' photos where you make eye contact are off-putting. Or at least there are to women, I think the study was. Oh. Whereas women making eye contact, confidence. Men making eye contact is like a please.
Okay, well
like too eager. Males got way more attention if they're like uninterested, doing something else. Whereas women were getting more interest if they were like, I'm looking at you, motherfucker.
Where she's like, oh, that guy looks disinterested like my father.
Essentially, probably, something like that.
So it's often, again, a product of the sexism inherent in our society.
Right, and in your case, same thing, but, you know.
Here's me. You took this picture with me in a tank top in the sunlight in the backyard, and you were getting me to do this sort of pose, sort of... like a weightlifting type pose or something? Because you wanted me to take a picture of you doing the pose to check your progress in the gym.
Yeah, it was something like that.
And I copied the pose because you told me to, and I was like, oh, it's a good picture.
Yeah, it came out really well. And notice, you look buff, but also you're looking away.
I am looking
just
away.
like their daddy.
Just like their daddy does, and that's why they want me to be their daddy. So that's also what I use on my Grindr photo, having done this testing. Then, like, why have I chosen others? Here's me smiling, holding a toucan.
Right. So that one's interesting. You're happy. Great. That you've chosen to show that you can be happy. That's interesting in itself. You're traveling. You're virtue signaling over your like cool lifestyle, essentially.
That's right. I'm like, look, I travel. I'm kind of happy and smiley. And there's a really cool bird on my arm, which provokes questions of where are you? How did that happen? What's going on?
Conversation starter.
Yeah. Third one is me and Ned.
Ned the cat.
So I've chosen to be with a cat because I like cats.
Okay.
And this is me and Ned kind of looking into the distance. I chose it because it's a kind of silly picture implying that I can be silly. I don't take myself too seriously. Yep. I like cats. It doesn't have to be a picture where I'm like showing off. So I'm trying to show the first case, like the side of, look, I work out and I'm confident. And here is, look, I'm also kind of funny.
Yeah.
This one, I don't know why I'm still keeping this one. It's me laughing. It was from a shoot a friend did that was like some profile pictures for, whatever purposes. I like it because I really feel like it's me in there. Maybe not so. Do you agree?
I think they're all you.
Well, I guess I hope so at a soul level, but
I don't mean like clearly there are pictures of you. There's no one there that isn't John. I mean, I see all of those people in you all the time. Like I don't know if that's how everybody sees you, but I don't compartmentalize aspects of you into my decision of who you are.
Thank you, sweetie. There's two more, and the next one is this.
Okay.
Do you want to describe what you're looking at?
I'm looking at your sexy washboard abs. Is that an 8-pack? Oh my God, I think it's an 8-pack. And a lathered?
Yeah, lathered up.
Chest. All the little hair standing up.
And it's sort of this...
Very sexy photo.
It's a sexy photo that Jamie took, which I guess there's two parts to this. One, I put it up because him taking pictures of me recently, because usually I hate the photos being taken of me, has given me much more sense of confidence in myself. And to be able to go, I feel confident in my body, I feel sexy in a sort of, I'm expressing that energy of myself into the world. And it's not about because I need sex from other people. It's like, this is me, I'm embodying this aspect of myself. It's also kind of arty picture thing. And why might I put it up? Well, so that guys think that I look hot and in shape. It's kind of that simple. But I also put it up because I like the fact that that Jamie took it and that he's sort of still present in this part of like a dating app type thing. And the final one is me post surfing.
Okay.
Again, with the shirt off. Body confident, but also this kind of another aspect of traveling, doing stuff. And thank God they didn't see me like on the surfboard because it would be like one leg going up in the sky and my head going into the water. But
cool, good range. Shows that you've got varied interests. You're outdoorsy. You're buff, sweet.
Sweet, because I got a kitty.
You are trying to convey your personality through your pictures.
That's what I think I was trying to do. And so I find maybe because I'm so conscious of trying to go, here's a bit of a range and look, I can be fun and sexy and all these things, that if I see other people choosing pictures which seem to be just them glaring into their web camera in like slightly different faces of angst, I'm like, what are you trying to show me? What does this mean exactly? And I don't really know. I guess maybe it's as simple as I don't have a camera, but I assume you have a smartphone if you're using this app. So what's happening there? And it implies to me a lot of potentially it's sort of laziness, but I think it's also a real lack of self-confidence or willingness to open up and say, here's some aspects of my life. I love to see on like a profile, if it's written down or if it's in pictures, is you doing some weird shit that you're passionate about. And like, oh, you're playing Warhammer. Well, that's cool. You're confident enough in your passion to share it. Maybe I don't want to play Warhammer, but I think you're cool because you're willing to say you are.
Okay. Wow.
Bring on the geeks.
Bring on the geeks.
I had a note here to talk about like potentially the dangers of dating apps. And there's the catfishing thing, that people can pretend to be other people, which I guess is more of a risk than it might be through more old-fashioned ways of meeting people. There's also a good general rule if you're meeting somebody for the first time to do so in a public place. I've definitely broken the rule in the past plenty of times, just like, yeah, come round to my place, okay. But back to what we said earlier, I think it's very hard for the crazies to hide themselves effectively.
Yeah, I mean, well, I don't know, but it certainly seems that way. But maybe those are the innocuous ones. The ones that hide well are the ones you can't pick out. The ones that you should be afraid of.
Yeah, so it may just slip up. I might slip up at some point.
We all, I mean, we can keep talking. I just wanted to make a point that we are now at 1 hour and 5 minutes. Should we keep going with this one, or should we break it up?
Well, if you've got tons more to say, we can break it up. But I don't have much more to say apart from maybe we have a little wrap. We can wrap it up a little bit with some closing thoughts. Okay. What do you want to do?
Well, let's wrap it up then. Let's
wrap it up before you whack it up.
No, I just wasn't sure if it was going to go much longer because. Yeah, it seems like you could keep talking about this for quite a while.
Well, I think that, and that's part of the reason that we chose the topic, is that it's not really about the apps. It's about what we see in behaviors and self-understandings and the psychology of using the apps. Yeah. I don't think apps are really changing things. They're just providing new media through which we express our existing hang-ups and desires and wishes. And we're sort of learning how to do it as we go. But I think that when it comes to things like trying to find intimacy with other people, we're always just learning as we go. You can read your dating books, you can do that. Did that ever really help you that much?
Dating books? Like pick-up artist stuff?
Not like pick-up artists.
Yeah, it laid out a pretty solid foundation for me to sort of be able to pick up girls if I wanted to.
Damn it, my question was rhetorical, but you've answered and proved that it shouldn't have been. What I kind of mean is that you can't gain total control over these things. There's the X factor of the other person.
By trying to. Yeah. A lot of true control comes from letting go of it. Mm-hmm. And then it's more about flow.
Surfing with the current of events.
Feeling the synchronicity. Or like, what does Martine say?
Well,
he said something about, I'll call you when it feels...
When it's indicated or something, probably. You didn't show me his message.
I forgot. Anyway. But yeah, but there is a kind of a resonance and a wave-like pattern to everything that if you tune into, it's more about surfing it or catching it rather than trying to make the waterway go where you want. And the moment you learn how to sort of go along with it, you can find opportunities, as opposed to trying to manufacture them out of nothing, which is what most humans do, which create situations that don't work, like pick-up artists that are mechanically going through steps and not really feeling confident, but pretending that they are based on a series of like techniques. You know, there's a difference between Arnold seducing the pants off like nearly every woman that ever meets him purely because he's truly confident and charismatic in himself, and someone that, you know, is using negging or, you know, like cube technique or like things to try and manufacture intimacy in a short space of time. Arnold doesn't need to do that. You know?
Arnold.
But you can get to an Arnold-like level by doing pickup stuff, which then
gives you the confidence.
Gives you more confidence, or you learn a bit more about behavior. You experience more people, so then you know how people react when you say or talk. There's less anxiety around it all.
If you're willing to go into it as a learning experience, like the danger and difficulty of it is, I think that we feel so much of our self-esteem is on the line. We're going because someone is going to accept or reject us, or we do or we don't get what we wanted. But at least you have control over that bit, what you do or you don't want. And if you can go in with the thing of, I'm open to the experience of what's going to happen, whatever it may be. And I why would you want to be in a situation where you would want to hang around with someone who doesn't want to hang around with you? I think that I've lost the thought that I was going to say. Like, I think maybe dating apps I feel they've given me more opportunity to meet people and sort of to get past an initial hurdle of the hurdle of kind of admitting that there's some sexual interest. It doesn't mean that it's necessarily going to go anywhere, but if it's already through an app and it's easy to like send a kind of somewhat revealing picture, you're sort of establishing, there's a thing here between us. And then to meet, I feel like it's good that there's a sense that point has been passed. That doesn't mean that we're going to go to bed or around the back of the bike sheds, but it can mean that we can go, okay, let's see if this connection is something that we both want to pursue.
Right.
I see that as a big positive in that.
Yeah, no, it's a tool, like all tools. It's not inherently evil. It's about how people use it. But it is a new super conduit for the greater consciousness, I think. Like all the social apps, like the internet before that, like roads before that, like railroads before that. It has created a conduit for the faster exchange of information. In this case, it's sexual behavior information. So what I think you'll see is an accelerated homogenization and speed in trends adoption within sexual and dating behavior.
Okay.
It's going to speed up what the basically the fashion of what romance and dating is. You'll see just like, trends on Twitter and hashtags and people like essentially the Arab Spring being possible because of social media, because people were aware of each other.
Oh, the Arab Spring. Sorry.
Things like that.
The app spring.
Well, things that weren't possible before because information moved too slow. That are now possible. Will also be there'll be a mirror of that in dating and sex. I don't know in which way, but it's going to be interesting to see how it affects the speed of adoption of what's acceptable, for example, or a backlash against certain movements. For example, it'd be interesting to see any impact things like Me Too movements and the whole backlash against powerful men using sex to intimidate or getting the rocks off, how that ties into how people behave on these apps, and therefore how quickly that change in behavior spreads to other people. Like there could be like an entire section of scientists dedicated to this, and they still wouldn't scratch the surface. But I think because it allows for free and fast exchange of behavior, that is going to be interesting to look at.
That is interesting. I don't think I can top that. Like that, you've zoomed us out to a big significance here. I think like they reveal power relations as well. It's not just behavior generic. It's power in terms of how you're trying to present yourself, to control that, to control other reactions, to show what you want and what you don't want. It's a place where social power dynamics are really laid more bare than they are visibly in everyday life. So like that quote about, it's not that power corrupts, it reveals. I think tools like this, social media and dating apps in particular, reveal a lot.
They do. And also, they're like the nervous system for the super collective consciousness we're creating. I do believe that internet-like devices are making Gaia happen, but I don't know if it'll be the kind of Gaia we want.
It's not the kind of guy I want. And on that hilarious wordplay, I think that's the end of this episode.
Okay.
So everybody on your dating apps, please be silly, be kind, and be weird.